So, you want to buy a McLaren. Most people think this is a Ferrari with a different badge. It isn't. It's the fastest way to lose $250,000 while going 200 miles an hour. And the strangest part is that the company selling it to you was doing exactly the same thing to itself. Subscribe now, because by the end of this, you'll understand how a brand this brilliant almost went completely bankrupt, and why buying one anyway still might be the smartest dumb money you ever spend. Let's start with the price, because with a McLaren, the price is only the deposit on the damage. The current entry car is the Artura, the plug-in hybrid V6, at around $255,000. Above it sits the 750S, the twin-turbo V8 that replaced the legendary 720S, starting near $351,000 for the coupe and $371,000 for the Spider. And then the personalization, run through a division called MSO, McLaren Special Operations, where a contrast pack alone starts at $30,000 and a full custom build climbs past $40,000 on top of that. On paper, this is Ferrari money for a car that a great many reviewers will tell you actually drives better than the equivalent Ferrari. Hold that thought, because it makes what happens next even stranger. But here is where the McLaren story splits violently from every other supercar we've looked at. A Ferrari holds its value, a G-Wagon appreciates. A McLaren does the opposite of both, and it does it fast. For most of the last decade, McLarens were notorious for shedding 20% or more in the first year and roughly half their value in 5. A 650S lost nearly 45% in 6 years, and the newest cars are the worst offenders. Over the past year, the McLaren GT dropped about 9% and the Artura fell around 21% as dealers struggled to move unsold inventory. There are 2023 Arturas that stickered at $280,000, now trading used for $185,000. That is a $100,000 hole in 2 years and barely 2,000 miles. Let that sink in, because it's the entire thesis. The exact scarcity playbook that makes a Ferrari or a G-Wagon behave like an asset is the thing McLaren never had. McLaren built cars fast, launched new models constantly, and offered aggressive incentives to move them, which meant there was always a newer McLaren making yesterday's McLaren look old, and always a discount undercutting the used market. Every lever Ferrari pulls to protect resale, McLaren pulled in the opposite direction. The result is a car that is genuinely, sometimes objectively, better to drive than its rivals, and worth dramatically less the moment you own it. And it compounds. Every time McLaren launched a new model, and it launched them constantly, the previous one was instantly the old car, which crushed used values, which made buyers nervous about buying new, which forced more incentives to move the new ones, which crushed used values further. Ferrari spent 70 years building a resale religion. McLaren, in barely 15 years of building road cars, built the opposite, a reputation that the smart move is to never ever buy one new. When your own customers openly advise each other to wait 2 years and buy someone else's, you have a brand problem that no amount of lap time can fix. Now you'd assume a company selling that many cars at those prices must be minting money. It was doing the exact opposite, and this is the part that makes McLaren unlike anything else in this series. The company that builds these machines was hemorrhaging cash on a scale that dwarfs anything its customers lose. McLaren Automotive's losses widened to around £920 million in 2023, more than $1 billion in a single year. It had raised £1 billion in 2021, bought out a Saudi stake in 2022, and still could not stop the bleeding. The maker of one of the most desirable objects on Earth was, in plain terms, going broke. And it wasn't a one-year blip. The losses had ballooned from around £349 million to $924 million in the space of 12 months. This is the paradox that sits at the heart of the whole industry. Building supercars is one of the most glamorous businesses on Earth and one of the worst ways to reliably make money. The volumes are tiny. The engineering costs are enormous. The emissions rules keep changing. And every few years you have to spend a fortune developing an entirely new platform for a market measured in the low thousands of buyers. Glamour and profit almost never sit in the same driveway. So who rescues a company like that? The same kind of buyer who shows up at the end of every one of these stories. A sovereign wealth fund. In December 2024, CYVN Holdings, an investment vehicle owned by the government of Abu Dhabi, agreed to acquire 100% of McLaren's car business from Bahrain's sovereign fund, Mumtalakat, in a deal reported around £1.2 billion. Abu Dhabi didn't buy McLaren because it wanted to sell cars. It bought McLaren for the same reason Qatar buys airports and Saudi Arabia buys football clubs: the badge, the Formula One heritage, and the electric vehicle engineering that comes with it. The cars themselves were almost beside the point. CYVN already owned a roughly $2.2 billion stake in the Chinese EV maker NIO and a controlling stake in Gordon Murray Technologies, the firm run by the very engineer who designed the original McLaren F1. What Abu Dhabi was assembling was not a car collection. It was a globally connected mobility platform, a portfolio of brands, batteries, software, and racing IP, and McLaren was a trophy asset with world-class engineering that happened to be available at a distressed price. When a company loses $1 billion, its heritage stops being priceless and starts being for sale. Because if you think the company's losses were bad, wait until you see the running costs on your side of the deal. And McLaren isn't just expensive to buy, it is savage to keep. High-performance variants can run anywhere from $17,000 to $50,000 a year in maintenance alone, depending on how hard you drive and what breaks. And with a McLaren, things break. These are low-volume, carbon-tubbed, hydraulically suspended machines built in the low thousands, not the millions, which means parts are expensive, the specialists who can touch them are few, and a single major service can cost more than a well-optioned family car. Then stack on the usual supercar bleed. Insurance on a car worth $350,000 runs many thousands a year, more if you are younger or urban. Tires are a soft compound built for grip, not distance, and a set can vanish in a few thousand enthusiastic miles. Fuel economy is a rounding error and it demands premium. And unlike the G-Wagon, none of this is offset by the car holding its value, because it doesn't. On a McLaren, the depreciation and the running cost point in the same brutal direction, down, and they do it at the same time. If breakdowns like this are why you're here, subscribe now, because this is where it stops being a car and becomes a pit. So the honest picture is this: you are buying one of the finest driving machines ever built from a company that recently could not pay its own bills, in a car that will lose value faster than almost anything else at its price, and cost you a small fortune to maintain while it does. Every rational signal flashes red and says, do not do this, do not buy this car, walk away and buy the German thing that holds its value. And yet, buried inside all that carnage is the one angle that flips the whole story, the same one that always hides at the bottom of these businesses. The very fact that McLarens depreciate so savagely means the second buyer inherits an incredible machine at a fraction of its cost. A 720S that's stickered well north of $300,000 can be found for low 200s. A 600 LT, a genuinely special car, sits around $213,000. You will never make money on a new McLaren, but buying a 2-year-old one, after the first owner has absorbed the $100,000 hit, is arguably the best value for performance in the entire supercar world. The first owner's disaster is the second owner's bargain, and in no other supercar brand is that gap so wide or so reliable. With a Ferrari, you pay a premium to skip the queue. With a McLaren, you get paid, in the form of a massive discount, to be patient. The market has quietly priced McLaren's greatest weakness into the best performance per dollar deal in the exotic world. And there is a narrow slice of McLarens that break the depreciation rule entirely, which is where the collector money quietly lives. The limited purpose-built cars, the 675 LT, the 765 LT, and above them the P1, and the near-mythical original F1, behave nothing like the mainstream range. Some 675 LTs actually gained value in recent years. The 1990s McLaren F1 is one of the most valuable cars on the planet, trading well into 8 figures. The pattern is the one we've seen every time. The ordinary cars bleed, the rare ones climb, and the difference between them is scarcity that the manufacturer either created on purpose or, in McLaren's case, mostly stumbled into. And now, the risk nobody in the showroom mentions, because it's specific to this brand. When you buy a McLaren, you are also buying a bet on whether McLaren still exists, and in the same recognizable form, in 10 years. New owners mean new priorities. Abu Dhabi bought this company for its EV and software potential, not its love of naturally aspirated theater, which raises real questions about what a future McLaren even is. A brand mid-transformation is a brand whose back catalog can swing hard in either direction. The last of a bloodline can become a treasured collectible, or an orphan nobody wants to service. The rescue that saved McLaren also introduced a new uncertainty into every car it has ever built. And uncertainty is the one thing resale value cannot stand. Underneath all of it sits the same quiet machinery every luxury car maker runs. McLaren captures the margin on the car, whatever margin it can manage. It captures the personalization money through MSO, where the options carry a far fatter markup than the metal. It captures years of eye-watering service revenue on cars that need a lot of it. And now, under Abu Dhabi ownership, it captures something new: access to serious capital and EV engineering that a small British supercar maker could never have funded alone. The customer buys the car once and pays McLaren for as long as they keep it running, which, given the maintenance bills, is a long and expensive relationship. Time to pull it all together and answer the actual question, the only one that matters. How much money do you make, or far more likely lose, if you do this right? Let's run the math on 3 realistic versions of your McLaren. Option 1, the trap. You buy a brand new Artura for $280,000 because you couldn't resist being first. 2 years later, it's worth $185,000. You've lost nearly $100,000 in depreciation alone, before insurance, before a single service, before fuel. Add $30,000 in running costs across those 2 years, and you've spent roughly $125,000 to drive a car for 24 months. This is the most expensive way to own a McLaren, and it's the way most first owners choose. Because the thing that gets people into the dealership, being first, being seen in the newest car, is the exact thing the market punishes most. You paid $100,000 for the privilege of being the person who made the 2-year-old car cheap for everyone else. Option 2, the smart play. You let someone else buy new and eat that first crater. You pick up their 2-year-old 7.2 OS for around $210,000, a car that has already done most of its depreciating. You get one of the greatest driving experiences money can buy for the price of a new SUV, and while it'll still cost you $20,000 to $30,000 a year to run, the value drop from here is a fraction of what the first owner suffered. Many of these cars still carry the balance of McLaren's service and warranty coverage, which transfers to you, so you inherit the machine and some of the protection without paying for the privilege of being first. You didn't beat depreciation, you just had the discipline to let it happen to someone else first, which in this brand is the closest thing to genius the numbers allow. Option 3, the collector's exception. You buy a limited run car, a 765 LT or a P1, and for once you are not buying a liability. These rare McLarens hold or climb while the mainstream range slides beneath them, but the entry price is brutal. The allocation is hard to get, and you're making a bet on which specific car the market will decide to love. Choose right, a 765 LT, bought at the right moment, and it's the one McLaren that holds, or even pays you back, while everything around it falls. Choose wrong, or overpay in a hype spike, and you own a very fast, very expensive lesson in how scarcity actually works, and how the same badge can be a collectible in one specification and a liability in another. The line between the two is thinner than the salesman will ever admit. So here's the verdict. The G-Wagon is a car that refuses to lose money. The McLaren is the opposite, a car that loses money faster than almost anything. Sold by a company that nearly lost everything. Rescued at the last moment by a government fund that didn't really want the cars at all. And somehow, if you buy the right one at the right time, it's still one of the best deals in the supercar world, because everyone else already paid for your bargain. Most cars quietly ask you what they cost. The McLaren just tells you, out loud, up front, and the number is always bigger than you hoped and arrives sooner than you feared. Subscribe, and we'll do this again next week with the next machine that's absolutely magnificent to drive and completely, gloriously radioactive to own.